Welcome to The Block. I'm your host, Emily Proud. As always, Blake Brockermeyer and Carl Reed are here to break it all down. And guys, what a way to kick off the college football season. We had tight contests in every window. We had Thursday night, 2 games went down to the wire. On Saturday, UNC App State in a shootout in the early window. Then in the afternoon, UTSA and Houston went to triple OT. And Saturday night, we were treated to a top 5 matchup that was a 1-score game with 5 minutes left. And then if all of that wasn't good enough, Sunday night had the craziest finish of them all. So before we dig deeper into all of this, and we will, Blake, let's start with you. Give me just kind of your quick reaction to what we saw in week 1.
Well, week 1 delivered in a big time way. I mean, like you said, Thursday night through even last night through most of the game, every game, or not every game, but the big time games were very competitive. Lots of great plays, lots of miscues for a lot of week 1 things that you see where special teams becomes an issue, penalties, typical things. But it was one of the best week 1s that I can ever remember. And hopefully the rest of the college football season continues to deliver like week 1 did.
I know. It's a tough act to follow with week 1 here. But Carl, do you happen to have any thoughts about this weekend's action?
Well, it was number one. It was great to have college football back. It was big time games every single day in every type of situation. Some huge endings, some surprising plays. It's great for college football to have kicked off the season, but it was an unbelievable weekend of college football. We had a couple upsets. We almost had a huge upset from a team that some people think can win in the playoffs. So it was crazy to have the opening weekend that we had, and I hope that it delivers this year week after week.
Carl, you were kind of talking over yourself there. That was a clip. Explain to me when it was that you were essentially screaming into your phone over the weekend. What was that in reaction to?
Florida State LSU game, an amazing game, a wild finish. A lot of people picked LSU, including myself. They had some special teams mishaps throughout the game. Jaden Daniels, who had struggled throwing the ball the entire game, drives LSU down, scores what appears to be the tying touchdown. We headed to OT, and they get the PAT block. And that was an unbelievable ending. And they had a terrible special teams game just across the board. People are going to question whether or not you should have went for 2. But the most routine play in college football, the PAT, they missed it, and it gave Florida State an incredible win. And it was unbelievable to see that.
It's crazy. That extra point hit the crossbar, too. So it was actually still close to going in, but not quite. And guys, we've tried to do it already. It's impossible to cover all of this action. So let's just pick out the good, the bad, and the ugly from the weekend that was. And let's start things off on a positive note. Carl, what'd you see that was good from week 1?
Well, the thing that I saw that was good was Shedeur Sanders, Jackson State, Coach Deion Sanders. Shedeur starts the game with 17 straight pass completions. And so they came out and they made a major statement. Deion Sanders is going to continue to be a lightning rod. Does he convince Jackson State to move up to the FBS level? Or is he one of the hottest names in the coaching cycle, the net search, because multiple people are going to come after him? Talking to a group of guys that I know that normally watches HBCU football, you're talking about one of the first times in a long time that the football level was so high, we didn't care what the band was going to do at halftime.
What the band was going to do. Okay, so you said that his play was obviously very good, but what about this specific moment that happened in the 4th quarter? Shedeur Sanders, he's on the sideline. He already took his pads off, put on his nice watch, his chain, all of this before the game was over. Carl, what do you think about that?
Well, hey, the game was over in his mind. It's 59-3. They've let him know that he's done for the day. It's like his dad used to say, man, it must be the money. You know, the kid is having a great time, great game. He played great. I don't have a problem with it at all. Football is still supposed to be a fun game. They have fun with it. It was an exciting time for Jackson State. Great way to open the season.
Absolutely. The apple does not fall far from the tree there. Blake, what was good in week 1 for you?
Well, the SEC East was good in my mind. I mean, Florida played an incredible first game under Billy Napier at the Swamp. Their crowd brought it. Anthony Richardson played a fantastic game. What a dynamic athlete he is. He made play after play after play with his legs mostly, but threw the ball effectively when he needed to. So that was a huge win for them. Their defense with Terry Dean the third and Brenton Cox and really honestly everyone. They played great team defense against a very good Utah team. Really stepped up and got a huge win at the Swamp. And then the Georgia Bulldogs. I mean, we all, at least I thought that their offense would be a kind of a bigger part of the grand scheme of things this year. But man, Georgia looked the part this year. They are physically strong and they really abused Oregon up and down the field all night. They are athletic group. They're large. They really surprised me on how dominant they were. So the SEC East really had a great weekend, and those two teams are going to be having a great game here later on in the season.
Well, certainly. Guys, we've had some fun. We've had a lot of laughs, but it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. Blake, I'll send it back to you. What's a bad from this weekend?
Well, bad first was Oregon. I mean, Oregon, in my mind at least, was going to be a contender for the Pac-12 championship this year. They still are. They faced a team that they will not see again the rest of the year in the Pac-12. So that's good for them. But they really got outclassed. Bo Nix had a rough day. He's 0-4 now against Georgia. And they were pretty much dominated every phase of the game. So that was a bad showing for them versus a team like Kirby Smart said after the game. They just got better players than Oregon does. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. And then LSU. I mean, Brian Kelly came in with a lot of hype coming in from Notre Dame. Was it a cultural fit or not? Who knows? LSU fans don't care. They just want to win. And just to come out of the gates against Florida State, a team, that most people think that they would have won. It's basically a home game playing in New Orleans. Special teams was horrible. They looked like a deer in the headlights. It didn't seem like he was overly engaged on the mics with his coaching staff. Just a rough day for LSU. And then they still had a chance to win it at the end, and special teams got him again. So bad day for them, but he needs to change the culture, and he's got a great opportunity now to really put his stamp on this team. If guys aren't bought in like Kayshon Boutte and Malik Neighbors, then get rid of them and make a statement that you're going to change the culture for the rest of this season. And LSU has potential to be a competitive team this year, but they're probably a year away.
Get rid of them already. All right. We're not even into the ugly yet. We're just in the bad right now, but it's getting ugly already. Carl, what's bad for you?
Bad for me is the University of Utah. Utah is a program that we've talked about all offseason. Several people have thought that they would be in the mix for one of the playoff spots, expecting them to dominate in the Pac-12, which ultimately they might still do. But nobody had them picked to lose to the Florida Gators. We talked all offseason about how Utah was dominant in the trenches, offensive line and defensive line, and the Florida Gators just took it right to them and punched them right in the mouth. Billy Napier totally outclassed Kyle Whittingham in this game. They beat him in all facets. Anthony Richardson was phenomenal for the Florida Gators, but they just totally beat Utah up in the type of game that Utah normally wins when it turns physical. Florida lost a lot of players in the transfer portal. They had key injuries at the wide receiver position, and they were still able to come out there and hit Utah right in the mouth. It kind of makes you think Utah is not a contender to play in the playoffs, even if they run the table and win the Pac-12.
Yeah, it was a tight game there towards the end and a tough environment for them on the road. So we'll just classify that as bad. But Carl, what's bad enough to be ugly for you?
Whoa, Iowa. The Iowa Hawkeyes offensively, 7-3. They had, 2 safeties. and a field goal. They have to find a way to be able to move the ball. Now, everybody knows that I'm a run the rock. I believe in running the ball and being physical. I've always loved the way that Iowa has played, but you still have to have some imagination. You still have to have some ability to get into different formations, show different looks, and generate some offense. And you're talking about them going against an FCS football team here. You're not talking about them going against another Big Ten opponent. They have to find some answers offensively. Coach Ferentz' son is the OC, and that is, kind of hurt the narrative a little bit in some situations. But son or not, he's going to have to produce some points for the Iowa Hawkeyes offensively, because right now they look abysmal on offense, and there's nowhere really to go but up, because right now, this past weekend had to be rock bottom.
Blake, what was ugly for you this weekend?
Well, the ugliest part of the weekend, there was a lot of them, was probably Mac Brown's dancing after the Appalachian State game. I mean, Mac Brown's trying to do the Antonio Brown, which you gotta love it. The kids love it. They love to see their head coach doing that. But what I wanted to see was a picture of Gene Chizik in the locker room after giving up 664 yards to Appalachian State, because I'll tell you right now, there won't be a whole lot of dancing if that happens again. Mac Brown will give him the Manny Diaz treatment like he did when he was at Texas if that happens again, and we'll fire him on the tarmac when they land. So North Carolina's defense is better than that. They've got talent at all levels of their defense, and they've got to step it up, because they've got a really good young quarterback in Drake May, but their defense has got to step it up and eliminate what they did against App State last week, or it's going to be a long year.
And they gave up 40 points in the fourth quarter. That game, you thought it was on ice. You thought it was over. Not so much. By the way, Mac Brown turned 71 years old last week. So I don't know if we can say he's still got it when we're saying the dancing was a little ugly, but the team really seemed to love it. So that's all that matters. Guys, speaking of coaches, let's grade some familiar faces in new places. We saw coaching debuts for many, but let's start with Billy Napier. We talked about him a little bit. His Gators pulled off that massive win over number 7 ranked Utah. So what grade are you giving the first-year Florida coach, Blake?
Well, Billy Napier gets an A+ in my mind. If you could get a higher than an A+, let's say, because that was a great coaching job by Billy Napier. He delivered the goods offensively and defensively and special teams. They were ready, prepared, played it probably as good as they can possibly play, and you can expect week one. Having the home field behind them was a huge advantage. But if they don't win this weekend against Kentucky at home, then that's going to lose a little bit of the juice that it brought, because they can't just do it, every now and then. They want to go out and prove that they can be dominant at home. They have a big advantage, and Billy Napier delivered this weekend with a clutch performance in his first game.
Yeah, coaching for the Florida Gators comes with expectations, but they're going to be a little bit higher now that you're able to beat a top 10 team in week one. Carl, how does he deal with those expectations, and what grade do you give Napier?
Well, I give him an A, but he deals with the expectations because he wanted to be the head coach of the Florida Gators. And everybody knows that the expectation in Gainesville is national championships, is domination. They want to be like it was when Steve Spurrier was there and when Urban Meyer was there. They want to win big. You have to give them an A because they came out and they punched Utah right in the mouth and they took it to them. But Blake is correct about one thing. In the SEC, that schedule is challenging, and they have Kentucky next week. They have to follow it up against Kentucky. But, man, he's off to a great start in Gainesville.
Certainly. A few more guys. Brent Venables at Oklahoma, Mario Cristobal at Miami, and Lincoln Riley at USC. They all took care of business against inferior opponents, so we're going to give them A's across the board. It's kind of tough to really evaluate them when their teams combined to outscore opponents 181-40. Yeah, that's correct. I did the math there. So when do the real tests come, Blake?
Well, Oklahoma's got Nebraska and Texas coming up in the next, month or so. So they got Nebraska in 2 weeks. And so that's going to be kind of their first test. playing in Lincoln. That's going to be a great game. Big 8 rivals. So that's when I'll really judge Oklahoma and how they're doing this season, because they've got a few cupcakes to start off with. It's going to get real here soon for them, because their schedule will get a lot more difficult.
Carl, what's your grade?
Well, I will give those guys an incomplete for now because they haven't played anybody yet. You expect them to blow those teams out and be overwhelming to those teams. All good football coaches. But when we get into the thick of the season, when they start playing against teams who can beat them, Miami has Texas A&M coming up. Like Blake said, we're going to have Oklahoma against Nebraska, and that's a must-win game because you got Nebraska. Scott Frost is also on the hot seat. So he's trying to have his guys as motivated as they can come. When they start playing more of these challenging games, more of these big-time non-conference games and interconference games, then we'll get to see and get a real evaluation of where their programs are right now.
We got a pretty good evaluation from who's the next coach that we're going to, guys? I apologize. I just completely forgot. Brian Kelly. That's who we're talking about here. Brian Kelly, we got a good gist of how he did. You talked about this a little bit, Blake, and something that I want to ask Carl specifically. Blake, you said that you noticed the way that he was communicating with some of his coaches on the sidelines. Is that something that you noticed, Carl? Is there something that you can specifically see from his coaching job in terms of how he dealt with players and how he dealt with other coaches? What do you take away from his week 1 performance?
Well, I think that he was more filling his staff out. What I know about Brian Kelly is he's always been a super fiery guy. When he was at Notre Dame, he was up in guys' faces all the time. He would get involved in the offense. He would get involved with the defense. But this is his first time working with a couple of guys. And I think he kind of tried to let them fill out certain situations on both sides of the ball. But where they really, really struggled at was on the special teams game. 2 drop punts in critical situations. You had a chance to redeem one with the drop at the end, but you get a block PAT at the end. It was just a total cluster on special teams. And so one thing about it, it's the first game of his tenure, but LSU, just like we talked about Billy Napier in Florida, they didn't pay him $100 million to lose an opener to Florida State. They're paying him to compete for national titles, and he'll have to get him on that level sooner rather than later.
You gave him a D. A D. It's very, you see it right there at the bottom of the screen. A D. Blake, what do you give Brian Kelly?
I give him an F. I mean, we talked about it earlier, but
Yikes.
yeah, they didn't look the LSU way. I mean, they've got, Keyshawn Butte is one of the best receivers, at least one of the top 3 receivers in the country, in my opinion. He was a non-factor. He seemed checked out most of the game. They, obviously lost Mason Smith early in the game in a very strange injury that was unfortunate. But they just didn't look the part to me. Their special teams was awful. Jane Daniels was basically just a quarterback that completed some short passes, but was just basically just running the whole night. So you're not going to last long in the SEC with a quarterback that just runs the ball on every play. I will give him credit, though. At the end of the game, when they needed him the most, LSU came up clutch. They made some great plays to go down and score. And so there is hope. Like I said, I think it's a year away. Their next month worth of games are pretty easy. So LSU is going to win their next 4 games. Or they should win their next 4 games. So they can get things back in order, but they've got a long way to go. I want to see Brian Kelly show LSU football players and to show the LSU community who's down on him right now that this is his team. He's going to do things his way. And if you're not all the way bought in, then he's on to the next guy, because that's the way it's got to be at LSU. They've had some cultural issues there the last few years, and he has a chance to get that corrected right now.
Blake, and I think that's important what you're saying, because they have a lot of new guys on the roster. And in this transfer portal era, one thing that people have left out is that football is a chemistry locker room sport more so than any other sport in the country, and it takes time. But you have to be very iron-fisted with your expectations on selfishness, on commitment, and on buying in to what we're trying to do as a football program. And I do think Brian Kelly has the ability to do that, and he's going to have to do that to get everybody on track.
Yep, more than just what's happening on the field. Well, thankfully, he has a little bit of extra credit that he can bring that grade up playing Southern and New Mexico later this month. So definitely some opportunities to get back in the win column there. Guys, as we wait for the AP poll to drop, it's kind of a weird week, so we're still waiting for that. I want you to give me your top 5. Blake, kick us off.
My top 5 is Georgia is number 1. Georgia looked the part, way more than the part than I thought they would be. I knew they'd be really good, but they looked dominant against an opponent that we thought was going to be really good this year. So I'll give them the top spot. Alabama, I mean, what else do you want them to do? They won 55-0 over a team that won their conference last year. Great performance by them. Third, I'll go with Ohio State. I thought Ohio State didn't look like what we thought they'd look like offensively, and looked a lot better defensively than we thought they would. And then Michigan was a real surprise to me. I know Colorado State's not any kind of world beaters, but they dominated Michigan in every facet of the game, similar to kind of like what Georgia did. And with J.J. McCarthy, they've got a real upside at quarterback if they choose to go that route. And then I don't normally put a losing team in the top 5, but Notre Dame, I went into the season thinking that they were very overrated, and they lost their top receiver in camp with an ACL, but they really showed me something on Saturday night in the Horseshoe at night, gave Ohio State all they wanted to. And I can see them, if they went out the rest of their games, they'll have a chance to host Clemson. And then they play USC at the end of the year. If they went out, I think that they have a chance to make the playoffs. Not saying that they will, but after what I saw last night, I think that they have a chance to do it.
Blake, how we put Notre Dame in the top 5 and they just lost? What are you talking about? Notre Dame doesn't belong in the top 5. They just lost to Ohio State. They couldn't move the ball. Tell me, what are you talking about? This is an egregious addition to the top 5. I'm very surprised at you for this.
Well, they've got a new quarterback that played in one of the tougher environments in college football that did a pretty good job. They don't have a lot of explosive playmakers on offense, but they kept the game close until the very end. They were within 1 score of the game against Ohio State, who you and I both agree is probably one of the, at least until we saw Georgia, it was one of the top, let's just say their top 3 team in the country for sure. So I think they have nothing but room to grow. They had some players banged up that'll come back. After watching Clemson last night, I'm not sold on them with DJU. They've got a great defense like we've talked about all year, but let's not kid ourselves. Georgia Tech is not a team that's going to win more than 3, maybe 4 games this year. So I think Notre Dame's got a chance to win out the rest of the year if they can continue to grow. And Marcus Freeman showed us, everybody last night, that he is a very good defensive coordinator, head coach for Notre Dame, and that they're going to have a chance to do something special this year.
We already knew Marcus Freeman can coach defense, though. That's not anything new to us. Emily, here's the real top 5. I'm going to put you back on break a little bit. All right. First off, how do you kick Alabama out of the top spot? They won 55-0. That is ridiculous. Georgia had a great game against Oregon, but let's not act like Oregon is a powerhouse team yet just because of the ranking. You don't drop Alabama out of number 1. Alabama's still number 1. Georgia has to go to number 2. Super impressed with how they played against Oregon. Kirby Smart said it himself. They just got better players. It's going to take Dan Lanning some time to refill the coffers at Oregon and get them up to the highest level. Ohio State, we're going to have them at number 3. They started off slow offensively. We expect more from them, and I think they're going to give us more, and they'll hit their stride. Everybody's down on Clemson right now. All you saw on social media, every group chat, every barbershop, they want Dabo to bench DJU. That's all everybody wants to do. He's the most hated guy in the country right now amongst the big-time players, or guys that are supposed to be big-time. Cade Klubnik right now is the most popular backup quarterback in the country. But you can't disrespect Clemson. Still great on defense. Quarterback, well, they did struggle offensively, but Blake wants Notre Dame in the top 5, and Notre Dame struggled offensively, and they lost the game. So I got to keep Clemson in the top 5 at number 4, and then the University of Michigan at number 5. They got a crazy quarterback situation going on right now, but it's worked so far. We'll see J.J. McCartney next week, and we'll see where it goes from there. But this is my top 5. I still don't understand how Blake goes with Notre Dame after having a loss, but I know he's going to probably come in here and tell me I'm crazy for having Clemson still.
No, I think if Notre Dame played Clemson this weekend, they would have beat them. I mean, that's just facts, because Notre Dame would have stuffed Clemson's offense where they had nothing last night. And so we'll see how it plays off, and we'll see how injuries affect it. They'll play each other a couple of months down the road in South Bend. Lots of things can change between now and then, but I just think DJU, I'm kind of tired of bashing on him, but he's shown his upside, which is not a whole lot. He did improve last night as the game went on, but if Clemson wants any chance to win this year, they're going to have to make a change at quarterback. And if they don't, then they're going to waste a really good defense for nothing.
Blake, how is Notre Dame's offense going to score on Clemson's defense, though?
They'll get better. We'll see. I think it's week 1. They're broken a new quarterback. I think, they don't have a lot of dynamic playmakers that can make explosive plays, but I think they can move the chains behind a very good offensive line. One of their best, if not their best, offensive linemen didn't play against Ohio State, and that was a big factor in Jarrett Patterson. So he'll be back soon. I think they've got one of the better O-lines in the country. They're going to try to pound the rock, make some plays here and there, and play great defense and special teams. That's a good recipe to win a lot of games, and we'll see how it plays out. Injuries, of course, can change that quickly.
Emily, I'm feeling a bet. Me and Blake are going to have to make a bet on this Clemson Notre Dame game. That will be big time.
I don't want to just be dumping on Blake, but I do have to ask about you leaving Clemson out, because I think that's kind of the biggest differences between Clemson and Notre Dame, between the two of you guys. Is it just DJ Uiagalelei's play that makes you concerned about Clemson, or are there other question marks? Because I think that's, for me, I'm looking at the rest of the roster going, okay, Will Shipley is awesome if you give him the football. They've got an incredible defense. I don't have a lot of question marks, as many I would with Notre Dame. So is it just the quarterback play that kicks them out of your top 5?
Well, it's definitely not their defense and special teams. I think their defense and special teams is very good. Their offense is not a great offense. They hired from within, which I think is a mistake. Their offensive line didn't look particularly good last night against a Georgia Tech defensive line that I don't think a lot of people thought too much about. Their wide receivers dropped a bunch of passes. And Will Shipley, what did he have, like less than 10 touches last night? I mean, he's your best back. You got to feed that guy the ball. And so I just think DJU is not going to be able to beat you with his arm. He can run a little bit, but they're going to have to open it up. If they can open it up, I think their receivers will get better as the year progresses. But you're going to have to make a quarterback that has the not only the ability, but the confidence to throw the ball in some tight windows and against some lot better competition than they saw last night. Georgia Tech was not one of the top teams in the ACC, maybe one of the worst teams in the ACC, in my opinion. And they went toe to toe with them for the vast majority of the game last night.
Carl, is there a team that maybe you were considering, or was it very easy to pick your top 5?
Well, I think Texas A&M, you know, they're interested and intriguing team that's going to be right there at the top 5. And we'll know more about them after the Miami game, after the Alabama game, as the season goes on. They got some really tough games coming up. So that was a team that I considered right there. But I think as of right now, that top 5 is where we're at for right now.
All right. We'll write it in Sharpie, and we'll do this again next week, guys. Thank you so much. That'll do it for this Tuesday edition of The Block. Be sure to tune in every Monday through Thursday at 1 o'clock. Also, like, share, and subscribe to the 24/7 Sports YouTube page for all things college football.